Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. In case we do not see you, welcome to the SB Nation NFL show. Today is Valentine's Day Eve, Monday, February 13th, 2023, which means it is the morning after Super Bowl 57. We have a lot to get to here on the SB Nation NFL show, but a reminder before we keep going that this show is brought to you by DraftKings. DraftKings Sportsbook is an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app today and use code SBNFL for a special offer when you sign up. That is code SBNFL only at DraftKings Sportsbook. You can listen. I'm coming off a cold, so not my best self, much like Jonathan Gannon these days. But you can listen to the SB Nation NFL show wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe, leave a rating, write a review. You can also watch us on the SB Nation NFL YouTube channel or Facebook page. My name is RJ Ochoa from SB Nation's Blog of the Boys. The fantastic Rachel Prevet, as always, on the ones and twos from the home of some upset people, SB Nation's Bleeding Green Nation. But with me, as always, from SB Nation's Arrowhead Pride, it is Pete Sweeney, live and in living color from, I don't know what part of Arizona specifically. I don't know where the hotel is at, Pete. I don't want to dox you. Joining us as well as he has been for all of the playoffs from SB Nation's Pride of Detroit, Jeremy Reisman. Jeremy, let's see your beautiful face up on the screen. Pete, congratulations to the world champion Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, what a game. What a game. An instant classic. I think a lot of people are feeling, who didn't have a dog in the fight, that maybe it would have been nice to keep the penalty in the pocket late and see what happens in that case. But it is what it is. The game's over. The Chiefs are world champions for the second time in 4 years. And by the way, to your point, initially, RJ, Phoenix is huge. I did not really grasp how big Phoenix was. I am currently in the Tempe area, and I'm about to, after I chat with you guys for a little bit here, get ready to fly back to Kansas City.
You know, it's pronounced Tempe. I mean, if you've been there for a while, I would imagine you would have been told that by somebody. The P is not this big. Tempe. It's Tempe. It's very simple. Isn't it the capital?
The Tempanians have not subscribed that I've been pronouncing it incorrectly, at least yet. So maybe I can get out of that before I do.
Jeremy, you and I will talk about the holding call and everything that has happened in the aftermath of it, because we'll touch on the Eagle side of things in a little bit. But Pete has to leave us shortly, as he mentioned, obviously to catch a flight, likely watch a movie on the iPad or something, maybe read the book that you actually wrote. Pete, give us a plug for the book that you wrote very quickly before we kind of dive into the Chiefs side of things.
Yeah, I put out a tweet. I'm going to send another one here soon once they sort of complete the order thing. But yeah, I got contacted about 2 weeks ago and said, hey, we have a project if you want to work on it. It'll only publish if the Chiefs win. And I was like, oh, they're the underdogs in this game. I don't know if I want to do this extensive project while covering the Super Bowl for Arrowhead Pride and SB Nation. But wound up being worth it. It's a commemorative special book about the entire season called A Dynasty Begins. And again, I have the link up now, but I'm going to put out a new one because we got the cover out now. But really fun project. I've never written a book before, only done the web stuff like you guys, and what a team to cover. You know, this was a special year for Kansas City in the fact that they got past losing Tyreek Hill, which I think created a lot of doubt as to whether or not they'd win the division and certainly the Super Bowl. And so they were able to persist. And, you know, this to me was Patrick Mahomes' first real sign of, you know, like Tom Brady did, maybe he can win with different types of casts. And so 5 AFC title games, the 3 championships of the conference, and now the 2 Super Bowls in 4 years. So they're building something here. And I didn't want to say, hey, this is a dynasty, but I think a dynasty begins is fitting because we'll see if they can continue that as they go.
Jeremy, is it a dynasty? I mean, you've seen the tweet floating around with Patrick Mahomes' Wikipedia page and everything like that. He's obviously well accomplished. You're a pretty impartial person on most NFL things. Like, what, you know, we don't have to sit here and talk about the particulars of what the Chiefs did on Sunday. They won the Super Bowl. That's what matters. Like, where do the Chiefs kind of lay in your mind?
Yeah, no, I think it's fair to call this either the start of a dynasty or just, you know, get rid of the qualifiers. We talked a little bit about it during conference championship week. I do feel like the bar for a dynasty in the NFL needs to be different because there is so much parity, because there are such deep teams, because when you're in the NFL, I think what the Chiefs did that qualifies them for a dynasty specifically this year is being able to do it with a quarterback that is on a massive contract. That is the one thing that we've all circled as something that's incredibly hard to do. Even coaches are talking about it now. How you need this guy on a rookie contract. Jalen Hurts was that guy. And so now that the Chiefs have been able to amass a solid overall team, and don't get it twisted, like that is a solid overall team. This isn't just a team that's putting up 30 points. Their defense stopped the Eagles in the second half, and deserves a lot more credit than I think they got leading up to this game. So the fact that they were able to do that makes you think that what's going to stop this team from now on. And yeah, like losing Tyreek Hill too, trading away Tyreek Hill. That's a great point. That is a move that would cripple most teams, but I don't see anything stopping the Chiefs from being this dominant of a team year in and year out. And because it's a single elimination playoffs, maybe that doesn't mean Super Bowl every year, but getting to the conference championship, getting to the Super Bowl even, I think qualifies this team as a dynasty.
Pete, Mahomes went off Super Bowl MVP. It kind of felt a little bit early on, like in my head, I was like, who wins MVP of this game if Kansas City wins? Because it took Mahomes a little while to kind of really heat up, and the Mahomes stuff is kind of obvious. But who in your mind was the second most impressive player on the Chiefs? I know the answer, but I'm prepared if you're wrong.
I think it was Nick Bolton. I think
there we go.
He was key in a lot of tackles, and I think the key tackle was of Kenny Gainwell in the open field, because at that point it had felt like on 3rd and 4th down that the Chiefs were just going to keep giving it up until they were going to end up losing the football game. And finally, he stops Gainwell in the open field. I believe that was the 3rd or 4th quarter, and finally forces the Eagles to kick. And I think that sparked a little bit of belief in the defense that they can stop Jalen Hurts, because and let's not get this twisted either, and I'm not afraid to say it, like, yeah, Pat won the MVP. Jalen Hurts was the best player on the field. And so if I'm a Philadelphia fan, I am sick last night. And I'm not saying he would always be against Patrick. I'm not saying he would always be against Patrick Mahomes, but on last night, in that particular game, he had one mistake. And, you look at that just the dropped ball. Other than that, a perfect game seemingly for Jalen Hurts. And of course, the MVP is not going to go to losing team, so he doesn't get it. So Mahomes ends up getting it. I think it might have gone to Kadarius Toney if he just gets into the end zone on the return, because he had just scored a touchdown, and that changed the whole game. So about 3 or 4 inches from a possible MVP that was not going to be a quarterback, and then you would have really had 2 ticked off NFC East teams at the same time. What a thing for you, RJ, and the Super Bowl the Cowboys are not involved in. But yeah, Patrick Mahomes gets it. It usually is the quarterback, was able to get the 3 touchdowns, and I think the 2 key plays for him were the scrambles. There was one, I believe, at the beginning of the 3rd quarter, and then the 4th quarter to get them into field goal range before that sequence, which ended up with the holding call.
Jeremy, we have to get Pete out of here shortly, but a quick one for you. And like I said, we'll unpack the game a little bit more in a little bit. But no offense to your boy, Matthew Stafford, but it kind of felt like last year's Super Bowl was like irrelevant. Like it felt like nobody cared. I know I said that. Like it felt like who was bothered that the Rams won the Super Bowl? Like there are a lot of people who are bothered that the Chiefs obviously won the Super Bowl last night. So that being said, this does feel like an important moment for, I don't want to get like too big about like the future of the NFL, but this feels like an authentic sort of thing. Again, like I don't want to say that the Rams had this like Mickey Mouse title or anything like that, but am I wrong? Like, is my vibe off in that sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on what you're looking for in the Super Bowl. I do think, yeah, this Super Bowl certainly has more long-term staying power. I think I know the Eagles have a ton of free agents coming up, and a lot of those guys aren't going to be back, but it still feels like that franchise has a lot of staying power, especially with Jalen Hurts playing the way he is. And obviously the Chiefs are going to be a powerhouse. So, if you're looking for maybe a Super Bowl that we could see a rematch of either next year or a couple years down the line, like, yeah, this one has a little bit more staying power, but I'm definitely not biased in the fact that I thought the Rams Super Bowl run was interesting. They had a ton of, all-star players, blue chip players. And it's kind of fun seeing a super team make one quick run, and maybe they'll bounce back if Stafford is healthy and some of those guys come back. And it's a weak NFC, so there's definitely room for them to bounce back. But yeah, I think if you're looking for, history of the NFL, what Super Bowl might be more impactful, yeah, I would say probably this one.
Pete, 2 out of 4. Which one was more impressive? You're obviously a little bit of a prisoner of the moment here, and you've got the book on this one. But I mean, literally, which one is more impressive? The win over San Francisco or the win over Philly? Both required 10-point comebacks, which Patrick Mahomes flawlessly executed.
I think it's got to be this one because you paid Pat. That's where NFL.
To Jeremy's point, yeah.
I think that's where teams begin to struggle, right? Now, this Eagles team was freaking up and down just a lineup, right? And the reason that I think you were able to do that, is, partially is because the quarterback contract, right? If you're able to get a Super Bowl going and feel like a complete team and have the quarterback already paid, I mean, that to me is always going to be more impressive. Like the Chiefs also too, like they decided we're going to trade Tyreek Hill and lean into draft picks. And you just look at the contributors last night. I called it what would be the GM of the Chiefs. His name is Brett Veach. I called it a Brett Veach special game, because you look at the offensive line that was rebuilt from that disaster in Tampa that did a pretty good job against the Eagles, right? That was a matchup that everybody was worried about. And Patrick Mahomes stayed clean for the most part, except when he was deciding to scramble with a high ankle sprain, which I don't know about that decision making, but hey, what are you going to do? Then you talk about the folks who scored touchdowns in this game. Travis Kelce had the first one, but then it's Sky Moore, a second-round pick. Kadarius Toney, who you end up trading for. Then you have these defensive backs that they did struggle against the receivers in the first half, way better second half, and they're rookies in Jalen Watson and the first-rounder Trent McDuffie. So I just think, and even the Bolton is a second-year player, so they got him last year. So I just think this one feels more with the strategy and the stamp on it, whereas the last one, it felt like you had a lot of already established veterans. Anthony Hitchens, your boy, Tyrann Mathieu, who had success elsewhere, Tyreek Hill, who had been one of the best receivers in the game. This was a whole new team and a whole new cast of characters. A lot of no names, I think, to an extent as well, and they were able to pull it off. So to me, I think this one's more impressive.
Jamie, do you have anything for Pete before we send him on his flight? Fastens the tray table or whatever he's gonna do.
Do you want to give Eagles fans any credit for complaining about the field? Is that you want to get into that at all?
I would be more upset with Carl Cheffers. Chiefs fans have had plenty of run-ins with good old Carl, and it did seem like he was making bad calls both ways. The holding call was rough. James Bradbury said after that he was holding. I still don't know if that necessarily should have been called, because you weren't really calling that all night. And I would feel like I was shammed a little bit if I was the Eagles, because they were playing a great game. I'll tell you, at halftime, I didn't see a scenario in which the Chiefs were going to dig themselves out. Like, they were that dominant in the first half, and you could feel it. That is what's so impressive about the Chiefs too. Somehow they were, I'm telling you, it felt dead and buried, and they came out looking like a different team in the second half. And then I think I want to say this about the Eagles too. Like, when you're winning like that and suddenly you're stunned and you blink and you're down 8 points, to have the poise for Hurts and that offense to go down, not only score a touchdown, but score the 2-point conversion, you put the pressure back on the Chiefs. I just thought it was a really impressive showing. And I think if you're in the NFC, you hope that they could maybe keep most of that team together, because they were impressive this year. And it's a shame, and not to be like the Kelce brother take here, but it's a shame that one of these teams had to lose. I truly feel that, because it was that good of a game. And I had come in being like, I think the Chiefs are going to win by 10. You play this game 10 times, the Chiefs win 8. It's probably closer to 5-5, after watching it. But you never know until, you have the AFC and NFC team matchup. But it was a Chiefs night. And I think with Hurts, if there's one solace, and, how much solace can there be in a Super Bowl loss? It's like Hurts, I think, had a lot of believers before, but he announced himself as an elite quarterback on the national stage. And I know there had been questions in Philly, is he the guy, rumblings or whatever like that. Yes, he's the guy. And you have to find a way now to build around him and get back there.
I think all that's really well said, Pete. One quick one for you before you leave, actually. You mentioned it. I think everything you said, I agree completely with, especially how it felt like over. I couldn't even enjoy the awesome Rihanna performance, because I was like, man, the Eagles going to win this thing. Like, it was just such a terrible, kind of ride. But she was awesome. But so the decision to kick the field goal early on what was it, 4th and 2, that was the Harrison Butker miss. Obviously it worked out, or everything worked out. But in hindsight, it has to feel like every Chiefs fan agrees that was not you have Mahomes. You have the dude who just pulled this off again. Like, maybe this is a lesson for the future to go for it. I mean, the miss is the miss, but that felt like that was going to loom very large if the Chiefs did lose this game.
Andy Reid is interesting with analytics. I think he collects all the information. He has a great analytics team. With his guy's name is Mike Frazier, super smart guy. I actually talked to him a little bit on opening night, which was like a really cool experience. And what Andy Reid I think does is he takes all the information and he has it in front of him, and then he makes a call anyway, and he just goes by gut feel and it's a peculiar way. Sometimes the Chiefs do go for it, sometimes they don't. It's very hard to predict because you don't know what Andy Reid is feeling in that big old championship gut. But in that particular situation, he put the field goal unit on. Harrison Butker said after the game that he had a bad warm-up. He didn't feel great into the warm-up. So I wonder if he had that information. I don't know. But when you doink it, if you're going to go for a field goal, you got to make it. When you doink it, then you start to really ask questions, because that ended up being a 10-point swing. And I had a loss. You both do this. I had a loss outline written, and that was the sequence that I had. It was, the Butker doink, followed by the Eagles going down and scoring, the points. And that's a 10-point swing. And it felt like the Eagles were never going to look back from that. And my whole point on the night in this article that will never see the light of day was that the Eagles were aggressive, whereas the Chiefs were passive and they made mistakes. And then, obviously that didn't end up getting written. But I think that felt like a mistake and would have been the key point had the Eagles pulled it out. Sure.
You can follow him on Twitter at PG Sweeney. You can get the link to his book, A Dynasty Begins. I don't want to get the title wrong, literally. Nope. That's it. It's it right now. I'm in the phase of the fog of all this. That's what it is, right?
Yeah,
A Dynasty Begins.
It's called The Dynasty Begins. It's triumphbooks.com/Chiefs 2023. So
ADB, A Dynasty Begins, baby. Pete Sweeney, have a happy flight. I don't know what you're going to watch on it, but, pick something cool.
I'm going to try to connect to the internet and write some more, Audrey. There's a lot to say today.
Maybe. I don't know. Anyway, Pete Sweeney, have a great day. Come up of the week, Kansas City Chiefs.
Later.
Jeremy, we now have to talk about this game without Pete, which is going to be fun.
Sure.
But before we do, what was your favorite moment of the Rihanna halftime show?
Oh, man.
And what was your favorite commercial on the night?
I have to say, it was a bold and awesome choice to open with "Give Me My Money."
Right.
and to literally have the NFL Twitter account tweet out the title of that song, incredible. So I think I have to go with that. I don't know if I have a favorite commercial. I've never been a guy that's really that impressed by the commercials. I don't particularly like any of them. I know that what was the name of the cable provider one that screwed everyone up, including
Tubi
myself?
One.
The
Tubi
Tubi one.
Like confused everybody. Yeah.
Definitely my least favorite of the night. I don't know. How about you?
A memorable one.
Sure.
I agree on Rihanna. I loved, my favorite portion was Umbrella. I really wanted her to play Disturbia, but Umbrella was a great moment. I know everybody made the same joke that Tom Holland should have come out. That would have been awesome. On the subject of Tom Holland, my favorite commercial was the trailer for The Flash. I have spent, I don't know, whatever it's been, like 2 years thinking that movie's going to suck. But that movie looks kind of cool. So, and on the subject of movies, I finally watched Top Gun Maverick over the weekend, and it slapped. Yeah, it was really good.
So I hear. I don't know why I haven't seen it either, but yeah, I hear only good things.
I highly, 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 highly recommend it. It was awesome. It was a thrill. So cool. Much like this game was. I guess we have the field thing to unpack. We have the holding call to unpack. And I have a few other tiny little things myself, as I'm sure you do. Where do you want to start?
I want to start with the holding, because I think I have a somewhat fresh take on it, and I wrote about it on Pride of Detroit, because I don't think the issue is with the call. I think you're always going to run into bad calls, like with holding and pass interference being as subjective as they are. This is just part of the game that we need to get used to, unfortunately. And no amount of like full-time referees, you're not going to fix any of that.
Sky Judge, yeah, totally with you.
Right. The problem to me is that came with an automatic first down. And that is something I absolutely hate. It was 3rd and 8.
Okay. Right.
And when you have this many subjective rules in the rule book, the only way to fix it is to give them less power. And one very easy way to give a penalty less power is to remove the stipulation that gives them an automatic first down. So 3rd and 3, there you go. The Eagles still have a chance to get off the field. Get rid of like in almost every situation. I don't think there should ever be an automatic first down, because guess what? Most offensive penalties don't come with a loss of down, right? It's all the extra impact is on defense. So let's even things up, and let's just get more power out of the refs' hands.
I actually really do like. I do think this is fresh. I haven't seen or heard this so far in the aftermath of the Super Bowl. So let's see here. We've got holding. Defensive holding is an automatic first down for the
Yep.
offense. Illegal contact is an automatic first down. Is hands to the face an automatic
is.
first down?
Yep.
So that would be the third.
Yep.
And to your point on like as far as offensive penalties, the only one that comes with a loss of down is intentional grounding. But that one kind of makes sense.
Right. And illegal forward pass. But yeah,
that's true. But also kind of makes sense. Like
right.
you can justify why those, require the loss of down versus the defensive penalties. You can't. I really like that. And if you commit that penalty on like 3rd and 4 or whatever, and it's 5 yards, and like, well, it was 3rd and 4. Like that kind of makes sense. I love that take. I understand the emotion involved with wanting it to be different. The take that I like the least, I've assessed that I like yours the most, is you can't call it in that moment. That's dumb to me. Like if it's a penalty, it's a penalty. Like whenever, however it happens, it's a penalty. So you can't be like, well, you can't call it in a super important moment. Actually, you should call it like in a super important moment. Like that's when you should be at your best. Do you put any stock into the like, oh, James Bradbury's just saying this because he doesn't want to get fined? That's where a lot of people are at this morning.
A little bit. But at the same time, he could just say no comment, right? He could just kind of kick the can on the question.
Or not talk like Jonathan Gannon.
Sure. Right. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I saw the video clip and so it seemed like he was being sincere and yeah. And I'm also with you on the same take too. Like you can't officiate the game differently in a critical moment because then you're still making a conscious decision at the end of the game. Right. If you're not calling it, then you're calling it differently at the end of the game too. And that's just as impactful as calling it is not calling what appeared to be at least a somewhat clear penalty. So, I think Bradbury, he did what most defensive backs do when they're beat is tries to cheat a little bit and hopes he didn't get caught and he got caught.
Where did you come down on the play that Andy Reid challenged, the Dallas Goedert catch? Do you think that was or was? I think that was a catch. So, I understand you have to challenge it in that moment if you're Andy Reid. So I think it all just kind of worked out.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think we went to commercial break. Still not sure because Fox hadn't showed us a good enough replay or a slow-mo enough replay. But yeah, I think
Jeremy
he's still
coming for Fox this morning. Jeez. Yeah.
Hey. I have a lot of issues with TV broadcasts and how much they impact football games, but that's a whole different topic. But yeah, no, I think he was dragging his back foot. I think the deep shot, was it AJ Brown up the sidelines that ended up getting over
to Devontae Smith. That was
Devontae Smith. That's right. That one was a little bit more controversial. I still think they actually made the right call and the right overturn there, but I understand that there's a lot of debate around that one, and if there's a lot of debate, then you could make the argument it wasn't clear and irrefutable. But I think outside of the defensive holding at the end, which I also think was probably the right call, I don't think it was that bad of an officiated game. There was a defensive holding early in the game that didn't get called on the Eagles. But again, ticky-tack, best way to do it, just take more power out of the ref's hands.
I like that a lot.
That's the best thing.
To your point about the Devontae play, because I agree with you, kind of like subjective, or it's obviously subjective, but like kind of debatable. But like, do we not remember the last game that Devontae played, the early part of the NFC Championship game when he had the catch that was not called correctly? Like, and I know they blew them out, but still, like you can find both ends of the spectrum. Is my point. What about because I agree with you, like the lack of holdings or whatever that weren't called, the Lane Johnson false starts. And I think is partly skill. Like I give Lane Johnson credit for just kind of timing things to a certain degree. But again, it's kind of in that gray area. Where did you come down on the Miles Sanders fumble that Nick Bolton recovered for his second touchdown of the night that was not called, that was ruled incomplete?
Yeah, that one's tricky, right? The whole like, what is a football move after you get your first 2 feet down? And it's clear he didn't make a third step, but did he start to protect himself a little bit? Hard to say. Again, if it's that close, maybe you leave the call as it stands. It was an incredible defensive play. And so part of me is just like, that looked awesome. That was a really good play. Let's just give credit to the defense. Let's just give him a touchdown. But I think they probably got that one right too. Mike Pereira certainly believes so in the booth. And he probably knows the rules a little bit better than I do. So I don't have a problem with that one. Did you?
No, what I actually really liked, and I tweeted about this in the moment, and then I think we should we only focus on when we think the officials are wrong, and we're like, oh, these dudes suck, whatever. But like,
Right.
and I think we say this all the time. I was a big fan of letting that play out.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
something that's stupid is when it's like, well, we blew the whistle, so like we can't undo it. We can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Okay,
Right.
let the play out so that we have the result, like, and we can get this right. And then you want to go into the hood and you want to figure it out. I might disagree with you. I thought it wasn't a catch under the like ambiguity that we live in, obviously. But I mean, if it had been a catch, like at least it wouldn't have been like, well, there was no clear recovery and whatever. Like that would have been really unfair. So I'm happy that they let it play out. They made the right decision. Cool. I'm good on all that. The field, holy crap. All the stuff about 800 grand, Oklahoma State, the USGA, like all these people took all these L's on the field. I think about this all the time, Jeremy. It's the Super Bowl. So it's the Super Bowl for like everyone involved. And I don't just mean like the players and coaches, but like the production crew, right? Like the halftime performers, the commercials. Like it is literally the like elite version of whatever job you do if you are involved in the Super Bowl. So if you're involved in the like art of groundskeeping, it is your Super Bowl. How did like I don't know what this is like. This is like maybe the Broncos performance against the Seahawks level of ineptitude as far as
Right.
groundskeeping. Like this was such a bad field both ways, and it really is a shame that it impacted what was kind of a fun game.
Yeah, and maybe that's the ultimate takeaway is that it was still a fun game, and maybe we don't harp on it too much, but at the same time, like game very well could have played out differently. I think part of the reason the Chiefs were able to keep that pass rush at the bay was those guys were just slipping and sliding as they were trying to turn the edge so many times. And so, yeah, it's disappointing to see. And this goes back to another take of mine that's unpopular, which is I don't like when weather impacts a game because it takes away
Mm.
some of these guys' best ability. It's the same thing with the turf, right? If the turf is not good, then you're not seeing the best athletes in the NFL perform at their highest ability. So yeah, it was annoying to see. It was frustrating to see, and I'm kind of thankful that the game winning field goal wasn't affected by the kicker slipping or something like that, because that would have just made things even more worse.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know that I buy that the Butker miss was affected by the field. But either way, I mean, it's just it's a shame. It's a shame that like it's a sham. Actually, the field was a sham. It was
Right.
really, really, really frustrating to watch. Man, what are we missing so far? Like we're kind of flying. Like I feel like we're moving very quickly. Like what have we not hit yet? I still have some things, but what's on your mind?
To me, the story of the game was the Chiefs' offensive line. It
Mhm.
was it
Zero
wasn't
sacks
perfect.
allowed.
0 sacks allowed. They outrushed Philly by a ton, and yeah, like to me, like Pete was saying, that felt like the matchup that everyone was circling. Where I don't know about this Chiefs offensive line, especially the right tackle against Hassan Reddick, and what Reddick finished with a tackle. It's kind of incredible, and it goes to show you that offensive line is pretty darn important in this league because obviously the Eagles have a really good offensive line in this league. So if you're one of the other 30 teams that wasn't participating in the Super Bowl, you're probably circling your offensive line as a pretty big pillar to building an NFL team, which is obviously not necessarily a big surprise or anything. But I think while we're all obsessing over how amazing these quarterbacks were, and they were amazing, offensive line to me was a big highlight last night, and pretty cool to watch, honestly.
I agree with you completely. And it has to feel kind of cool if you're Brett Veach, in that like that was your kryptonite 2 years ago, obviously, and that
Yeah.
you literally rose from the ashes. You know what I'm saying? And like delivered.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like you didn't just like allow 0 sacks in the Super Bowl that you want. You did it against this team that challenged the 85 Bears as far as the sack record.
Right.
Like that was the story. And you didn't just like win, you completely and totally absolutely neutralized them. This game also, to be Jeremy, felt like I feel like Eric Bieniemy has sort of, I would say, I know people feel he's been disrespected. I want to get into like all of that, but I feel like he's at the very least not gotten enough credit for the sort of dynasty that you called it, that we've seen in this era of Chiefs football. But this felt like the most visible, if you are blind to this for whatever reason, the most visible Eric Bieniemy contributions that we have seen. And I haven't read this story yet in The Athletic. It's on my bookmarks for later today. But written about in The Athletic was a play from the Eagles Jaguars game. Obviously, Doug Peterson's the Jaguars coach, where they ran that cute little motion that we saw twice from the Chiefs down near the end of this game. And so, like, that just really was Eric Bieniemy doing his homework and dominating a defense that had its way with most teams.
Yeah, I thought That's a good point, because I think I tweeted out towards the end of that game, like, this has been an offensive play calling masterclass by both teams, to be honest. And those back-to-back touchdowns with the motion were obviously the I think maybe the most obvious. The one that I point back to, and I only do it partially self-serving because the Lions ran the exact same play against the Eagles in Week 1. It was a sweep on 3rd and 1 in that last drive to Pacheco that kept the game-winning drive alive. Just a brilliantly kind of schemed up play where it's perfectly blocked. You had numbers essentially where it really didn't seem like the Eagles had any sort of chance to defend that play. Kind of one of the underrated plays that'll go overlooked, but was critical to them winning that game.
Yeah, and that was the play that Josh Sweat kind of like sold out on and just guessed wrong, and that opened things up all the more for Pacheco. To your point, the broadcast did highlight that. I have an underrated storyline that I want to get to, but you mentioned the broadcast. What did we think of Kevin Burkhardt and Greg Olsen? Because this might be like lost in the annals forever. Like if Tom Brady does show up in 2020, I loved it. I really enjoyed it.
I did too, honestly, and I liked that Olsen kind of went in on the defensive holding at the end. I think a lot of times announcers are a little bit afraid to lean into officiating controversies.
Jeremy, you are killing it today, but keep going.
But yeah, like I think sometimes, they want to shy away from that for whatever reason. Maybe they don't want to criticize the league. Maybe they don't want that to overshadow the main story of the game. But I feel like
they don't want to be wrong. You don't want to be wrong and then have everyone kill you. Yeah.
Right. And maybe he was wrong, maybe he was right, but I like that he picked a side, and obviously you have you have Pereira in the booth too to kind of level things out. And so, I'm one of the Greg Olsen fans. I know anytime there's an announcer that, makes an impact that makes his voice heard in one way or another is going to be polarizing, but I think he does an excellent job. I'm kind of wishy-washy on Burkhardt, but I think in general, like if you're unnoticeable as a play-by-play caller, you're probably doing a fine job then.
I'm with you completely. Something that I have said for now, I guess, 8 years is that Chris Collinsworth does not get enough credit for how immediately he criticized the Seahawks for the Malcolm Butler pick. Like think about the stones it took to like go out on that ledge in that moment. Cause there's, you know what I mean? And I, to this day, believe he helped, like you talked about how like announcers and booths or whatever impact things. Like he impacted the culture of that. Like so many people were so quick, rightfully so, obviously, to jump on them. But if he doubts that in the moment, I do think that maybe there's a little bit more trepidation in the fallout of it all. But that's a different thing. On the subject of not getting enough credit, to kind of go back to the Eagles, it pains me to do this. All right. And look, I'm very, very happy that the Eagles lost this game. And I'm very, very happy that Nick Sirianni did not win this game. But I don't think that Nick Sirianni is going to get enough credit, because this happens when a team loses, like everything is just swept under the rug. Not only just in general, but for the timeout that he did not call in the sequence that led to the Goddard challenge, the right before. And I know Greg Olsen brought that up, but it was 3rd and 9. And instead of burning a timeout, he took a delay of game. That is so smart. That is so smart to say, you know what? This is already like a difficult down to convert. Let's just make it 3rd and 14. If we pull it off, great. But this timeout is so valuable. There are too many teams, one of them, the team that beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl, that do not understand the value of timeouts in an NFL game. And I don't think that we're going to remember that enough.
No, not at all. And I think Sirianni was probably the best game manager in the NFL this year. The 4th down stuff was on display. I know some strict and some analytics guys that are very strict think that maybe they shouldn't have punted late in that game when there was 4th and 2 on their own 30-something yard line.
And they were down by 1. And everyone, I don't know if you've seen this, people have brought up in Super Bowl 52, in a very similar situation, they went for it. And obviously that was a big reason why they won the game. So I guess, how do you feel about Sirianni in general and the decision to punt?
It feels like a lose-lose there. It's a tough decision anytime, I think, to punt in your own side of the field late in a game where if you don't convert, that might be the ball game. But also in a game where the offenses were rolling on both teams, you could certainly make the argument that chances are pretty high that you convert there. And if you convert there, it's an entirely different ball game. So that one feels like a little ticky-tacky to complain about, especially considering all the other times that he did go for it on 4th down this game and did go for it on 4th down throughout the regular season and the playoffs. But yeah, I can see why people might get a little bit upset about that, because those little decisions add up. And I certainly think the Chiefs were probably more guilty of going against the analytics. I think you can make an argument that they should have gone for 2 to go up 9 instead of
I was
8.
going to bring this up. So your
Yeah.
team, so to set the stage, they were up by 1. It was 28-27. They scored the touchdown. That was the Sky Moore touchdown, the
So,
second of the motion plays. And so immediately after the touchdown, they're up by 7 points. And so a lot of people, you and I now both included, believe go for 2, make it a 9-point game, 2 possessions. There was about 9 minutes and change left in the game. They decided to kick the extra point and make it keep it a 1 possession game. But you are team go in that moment.
I think so. I think, analytics are going to be very tossy uppy on this one because 2-point conversions in general are about a 50% conversion rate. So you go for 2 and you make it. Great. Now it's a 2 possession game. You go for 2 and you don't make it. Well, now you've just given them a much easier chance at tying the ball game. But to me, I just think given how the game was playing out, given that the offenses were dominating that game, you just try to push yourself as far ahead as possible because it's not like they're going to go for. Well, I guess it's possible that the Eagles score and then they go for 2 to go up 1. If you
this is a hypothetical question. Say
Right.
KC goes for 2 and they miss, so they're up 7, and then the big Eagles touchdown or the big Devontae play happens, and then they score. If you're Philly at that point, do you go for the win? I mean, I know there's a lot of time left, but do you go for the lead at that point?
I don't think so because there's so much time left, right? Because now you've given them more incentive to hustle down the field, right? And so I if we're talking under a minute left, maybe.
Right. Yeah, certainly if it's like the final play of the game, or whatever, like time's expiring, you go. I'm with you, but like with that much time left, there was like 2.5 minutes left. I agree with you. I think you have to tie that game at that point.
Yeah. No question to me because I think the advantage of going up by 1 is much smaller than the devastating result of not making that 2-point conversion and trailing with 2.5 to go.
I agree with all of this that we're saying. And you talked about like the margin for error was thin and the like what the analytics will suggest and things like that. This game really felt like, how like when somebody punts from like their own like 46-yard line, we'll see like Ben Baldwin's bot like tweet out like the win probabilities like on the decisions to go for it or punt. This felt like one where it was like 51-49. You know, like the whole game in general, and like the Eagles were just on the 49% of that. You know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't like it was an embarrassing loss or they got blown out, but like you lost by that thin margin against what we're learning to be even more so is one of the better quarterbacks of all time.
Yeah, even that bunker kick, I think, was basically a 50-50 split on Ben Baldwin's bot. So yeah,
the miss that you're talking about.
Yes, yep. And so yeah, I think in general, like that's playoff football, but that was especially the Super Bowl. Is that little decisions are going to make big impacts, and whether it's an officiating decision, a punting decision, a field goal position, a timeout decision, all those sort of things are going to add up in a game in which these two teams were just so evenly matched and so good that the first person to blink is probably going to lose that game.
A lot of people had brought up how the 2 previous Super Bowls in Arizona had these like amazing seminal moments. The Butler pick obviously was one, and had that Butler pick not happened, it would have been the Jermaine Kearse catch. That would have been such a great moment to remember forever.
Oh man, yeah.
Right, and obviously the David Tyree catch. What if you had to put one of the plays from last night in that mix? Nothing had that level of consequence, obviously, just because the way the game unfolded. But what would be the play?
Man, I think maybe the punt return. I feel like that was kind of the I don't want to say the nail in the coffin because obviously the Eagles come right back and tie the ball game there, but it felt like, okay, this is Kansas City's game. Like everything is kind of going their way. They just stopped Philly. They had that opportunity where they could have gone up by 2 possessions had they gone for 2 there. So to me, that was like, okay, like the Eagles are completely on their heels at this point where they're going to have to play a perfect game the rest of the way, and they didn't. So I think that's probably maybe the defining moment. I don't know. Do you have a better one in mind?
The only one I thought of, so like in all my props and things like that I took all the unders on turnovers, right? Like on interceptions for both quarterbacks. Because both quarterbacks are so, I know Mahomes is not necessarily careful with the ball, but he's obviously very talented with the ball. And so I think you could argue the Hurts fumble, right? Like that was a touchdown, right? Like in a game that the Chiefs won by 3. And like, that at halftime, the Chiefs had one offensive touchdown, and that was the other one, obviously. And so that was such a rarity for Hurts, not just in the playoffs, but all season long. And so I know it happened earlier, and so I didn't have the like pizzazz. I think the Tony answer is a good one, but that was such a, you could tell. And another thing that I think is really going to be forgotten is kind of like the Nick Sirianni non-timeout is on the subject of penalties, I think there is an art to like selling them, right? Like kind of like, barking and,
Sure.
and squawking and screaming or whatever. And the Chiefs got the officials to call a false start on one of those Eagles scrum plays, right? And like, how many times have we seen them called? I don't know. I know that the Athletic did a huge deep dive on this subject, but I don't know that they'd been called for a false start on that specific play all season long. And the Chiefs got it on 3rd and 1. And lo and behold, on 3rd and 6, it's that fumble. I mean, like, like that is one of the biggest false starts in NFL history.
No, you're 100% right. And I'm glad you did bring up the Hurts fumble because, as Pete was saying, like that game was all Eagles in the first half. The Chiefs were lucky to only be down by 10. And had they been down by 17 or 13, even a field goal there, I don't know if the Chiefs can pull out of that hole. And so, yeah, I think you're right. It shouldn't be overlooked. Not that people are going to overlook a defensive touchdown or anything like that, but that had such a drastic impact on the game because I think Philly could have essentially put that game away out in the first half with the way they were playing, and they played good enough in the second half where I think if they had been in a 2 or 3 score lead, and they were in a 2 score lead, but 13 or plus lead going into halftime, I think they might win that game.
To your point on whether or not even Kansas City probably could not have climbed out of a 17-point hole, even with an entire half to work with. And everybody pointed this out, obviously, in the aftermath of the game. But, Jeremy, they touched the ball. The Chiefs did 4 times in the second half. In sequence, touchdown, field goal. And the only reason the field goal was a field goal was because they settled for it. I mean, like I think we both think they were capable of scoring a touchdown at the very end. So like, what was the extra possession that they would have needed? You know what I'm saying? Like, there just wouldn't have been, there wouldn't have been enough time. I mean, so like that's why it requires a little bit more explanation than the Tyree catch or the Butler pick. Yeah, but I think that the biggest swing moment was the Hurts play, especially given how careful Hurts was with the ball all season long.
Yeah, and it's tough to do that to him considing how amazing he
was
all
awesome.
night.
It was
it's such a fluky play too, right? It's not even like he did something stupid. No, it's so fluky. It's so out of character that it sucks that will be such a defining play of the Super Bowl. But it was like that when you have a defensive defensive touchdown like that. When I believe the Eagles were on the Chiefs side of the field at that point, so like. Scoring seemed very imminent for the Eagles at that point, and to really be a 10 or 14 point swing there. It's huge.
The Eagles punted once in the second half. I mean, and to be fair, that also includes the final possession of the game just being the one play. So, I mean, whatever. Right. But still, and it was such a fast second half in that sense. Fast but long. Like, the possessions were long and drawn out, and that kind of obviously contributed to everything. But if you had told any Eagles fan, as Rihanna was opening with an expletive, titled song. If you had said you're only going to punt once in the second half, you would have said 10-point lead, like even against Mahomes, like those odds are pretty good. It was, I don't want to say I don't think it's fair to say that the Eagles cratered, but they did. I don't know what a smaller version of cratering is, but they cratered in the right way, or the worst way. You know what I'm saying? Like they had the worst possible missteps. They were tiny, but they were just big enough to allow this specific team to take advantage of them.
Yeah, I mean, they scored 10 points on 3 second half possessions. Like, that's not terrible. It's not. It's
and
not
that included a 2-point conversion. To your point, oh man, Hurts was great. I agree that he sort of announced himself, but we talked about how difficult. As we kind of spin forward now, the story about the Chiefs is okay, great. They're a dynasty. They're going to keep building, whatever, blah blah blah. But now that the Eagles have to pay Hurts, that's a thing. The Eagles might lose both of their coordinators, right? There's going to be regression in all likelihood, right? And the Cowboys of this year, I can tell you, were the one, right? Somehow generated more turnovers than they did in 2021. But there's likely going to be regression as far as all those sacks are concerned. As great as Hurts is, the odds of him having this great of a season, are low. But he could certainly do it. I mean, he's obviously proven to be very talented. The A.J. Brown effect, all these things, you're likely going to see some sort of regression. I mean, it's very difficult to get back to the Super Bowl and certainly to get back and win it after you lose it, which the Chiefs just proved took at least 2 years for them, and they're very, very good. What are your thoughts on the Eagles moving forward into 2023?
I mean, it's a huge offseason for them. I don't know how many of those guys they're going to be able to recoup. There's 10, 15 guys I think that are headed for unrestricted free agency if they can't retain them. And not to give the Giants and Cowboys too much credit in front of you, but it's an improving division, right? those teams are starting to look good. And you know, I don't know if the NFC in general is going to be great next year, but I do think it's going to be better than it was this year. And so the surrounding pieces around them are going to continue to get better. And yeah, like losing your offensive coordinator, losing your defensive coordinator, and paying your quarterback, like we said earlier at the top, like it's very hard to get to the Super Bowl when you're paying a quarterback big. And maybe Hurts doesn't get, you know, a huge cap hit in year one, probably won't, the way NFL contracts are typically structured. But you know, eventually they're going to have to pay him and pay him a lot. And I don't think they're going to be able to have as good of a defense as they've been able to have these past couple of years. So they're going to have to rely on the draft. The good news for them is that they have 2 first-round picks and they can reload eventually. But that like you said, all this is going to take some time.
I agree. And they have a top 10 pick, obviously, by way of the New Orleans trade. So it's not just 2 first-round picks, to your point. Right. And we'll see if Howie's able to, you know, turn that into, he's the ultimate, like, Dwight Schrute, turning the tiny bean into, like, everything and everything and everything. But I'm with you. Like, it felt like a down year for the NFC, obviously. You know that as well as I do. But, like, I think we think the Cowboys and Giants are going to kind of at least be status quo next year.
Yeah.
The Lions are certainly going to be much better. The Vikings, I know everybody hates, but like they're at the very least competitive, right? Like you have to give them that. I think the Bucs will certainly regress. I have no idea what to expect from anybody in the NFC South. But who knows what happens?
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like I'm willing to give the Niners some credit and the Seahawks, and there will certainly be some positive regression for the Rams, but the Cardinals are such a question mark, obviously. Although we'll see who their head coach is, obviously. But a big factor that worked for the NFC East as a whole this year, obviously had 3 playoff teams, was the division. I mean, in the schedule, they play the AFC South, and next year the NFC East plays the AFC East, and so you got to go through the Bills and the Dolphins, and maybe the Jets are a little bit better. Obviously, the Patriots are the Patriots, and now the NFC East counterpart for the 17th game is the AFC West. So this Eagles team will visit Arrowhead in 2023 just to make things a little bit more worse on them. And so I guess it's obvious that we have more doubt in the Eagles getting back to this point than the Chiefs. Is that fair to say? I mean,
I think so for sure. Because I think there's going to be more moving parts, and Mahomes has been doing it for longer. Not that I have a ton of doubts of Jalen Hurts in general, but
splitting hairs.
But I guess I didn't realize that Chiefs and Eagles are next year. Do you open week 1 with that? Is that the opening game?
So they've done that once before in recent memory, and it was Broncos Panthers opened after the Super Bowl, and the Panthers got blown out. And like, I don't know that I believe it had a lot to do or anything to do with the raising the banner thing, but
sure.
I don't think that the like value that had to do with it is zero. Like that,
right?
And it's not, that game is in Arrowhead, so I'm saying you got to watch them. Like, do you remember the team that the Chiefs opened with the last time they hung a banner?
No.
It was so anticlimactic. It was the Texans, and it was the Texans coming off, because if you recall, the Texans blew that 24-point lead at Arrowhead as Kansas City rolled to get their first, or I guess their second title, but their first one in this era. I mean, like, I don't want to see Chiefs Bills in the opener. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I've seen that a million times. Like, I actually would really enjoy that. See Chiefs Eagles and get it out of the way early. So that would be a lot of fun. Is that what you would do? Or would you go?
I think so. Yeah.
Chiefs Bengals, like, who cares? Like, we've seen all those things a million times.
Right. And you'll put that on some Sunday Night Football in November and we'll all enjoy it. But to open the season, I mean, what better storyline than just replaying the Super Bowl, running it back and putting, I mean, that's got to be tough on the Eagles to not only sit and watch that team raise the Lombardi last night, but then have to essentially see them raise the banner the next time they see them. But I think that's fascinating. I'd love to see that.
Okay. So the Chiefs, despite Travis Kelce thinking that they are these big underdogs, were the betting favorites to win the Super Bowl. They did it. If you had to, I think if we had to take somebody over the field entering 2023, it would be the Chiefs, right? Like, obviously. But if we had to sit here and say, in a non-Chiefs world, who are the contenders for the Super? If you have to give me, we'll call it 7 non-Chiefs teams that you could see winning the Super Bowl. Who are they? You can pick any conference you want. You can go NFC heavy, AFC heavy. It's up to you.
But yeah, I think you got to stick with mostly AFC teams here, considering how good they are. So I think Bengals are probably right near the top of that list.
You
Bills.
can only do 7, so be careful as you think out loud because I'm going
Okay.
to count them. Okay, so
All right.
Bengals.
Bengals.
You don't
Bills.
have the Eagles on here, so
not yet.
So, okay, Bengals, Bills. That's 2.
Yep. Man, I don't know if I can say Cowboys in front of you. I don't think I'm going to allow myself to do that.
It's funny because Pete brought up Anthony Hitchens. I did not. Just to be very clear.
It's true. No, I'll throw the Eagles in there. I will throw them both because of the way that Jalen Hurts is playing. I think that alone can get you far, and they're going to bring a lot of those guys back, and a lot of those guys are going to want to come back, I think.
And he's closer to Joe Burrow. Like if we look at the Super Bowl losing teams and stuff, than he is to. I know the Chiefs got back. I guess technically we've seen the last 2 Super Bowl losers get back to the playoffs. Yeah. And so I mean, like they're closer to that mold than they are the like whoever you want to call it, the Panthers that lost the Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? So although I mean, I think entering that 2016 season, we might have all said like this Panthers team that was amazing. Like that's the terrifying, reality to consider if you're an Eagles fan. Like that Panthers team looked unstoppable. And Cam looked unstoppable, and then it came hard for them in 2016. Just ask Greg Olsen. He certainly knows. Okay, so you're up to 3. We've got Bengals, Bills, Eagles in that order. You have 4 more.
Man, I'm looking at the AFC now. All of a sudden, I'm like, I don't know if I want to spend another one on the AFC. Like Jacksonville maybe gets into the conversation.
So you're not willing to go Chargers? Like you don't want to put them in this tier?
I can't.
I'm with you. Like I'm fine not doing it. I mean, even though our guy Kellen Moore is there, I'm totally fine with that. But that would be what a lot of people would. That's By the way, the entire AFC West spent all of last offseason building and plotting to dethrone the Chiefs, and the Chiefs just won the Super Bowl. Like,
they all fell apart.
Yeah, it's so
in
stupid.
Incredible fashion. I mean, addition by subtraction there with Lombardi, but no, I just can't do it. And then NFC.
So you got 3. You got 4 spots left.
It's not a good sign that I'm already struggling to find some here. Mm-hmm. I'll throw the Niners in there. I don't know who their quarterback is going to be, but I'll throw them in there just because I think Kyle Shanahan's an offensive genius, and they're still loaded on defense.
Got to pay Nick Bosa this offseason. That's their big
I didn't
thing.
realize that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, again, backload that contract. You're fine for this year.
Sure.
Jeez. I got 3 more.
Mm-hmm. I presume the Lions are going to be one of them, but it's up to you.
Sure. You know what?
Okay.
Get the homerism out of the way.
Okay. I mean, well, like
8-2 finish to the season, man.
Look, I'm a big Pride of Detroit fan, and so I'm happy for you guys. But they are going to be the like I can see the shows in August. Like I'm taking the Lions to win the NFC North. Like that is going to be a very, very vogue thing. So I think we've got to put Detroit there. That's 5.
Yeah, I mean, and that division I mean, that's not necessarily saying you're going to make a Super Bowl run, but I think you could make a very solid, legit argument that they're NFC North favorites.
When is the last time they've won the North? Was it 1991?
Yes, when it was not the North, when it was the NFC Central. They have officially never won the NFC North, if you want to put it that way.
Wow, I guess because like thinking about it, I think about the playoff years, but they were all as wild cards, obviously. Yep. So wow. Tough scene. Okay, so we've got 5.
If I'm including the Lions, I got to include the Jaguars. Finished with the same record. They got a playoff win under there.
Okay,
again, so bad division.
So your 6 teams, 6 non-Chiefs, 6 non-Chiefs teams that you could see winning the Super Bowl next year. We've got the order you went in just off the top of your head was Bengals, Bills, Eagles, Niners, Lions, Jaguars. So you have 1 spot left. The contenders, in my mind, as I look at my little helmet collection here, are the Cowboys. The Giants belong in that conversation.
Sure.
I suppose you could put the Seahawks or Rams if you're in the right mood. The Chargers on the only 2. I wouldn't put the Dolphins.
Yeah,
the 2 AFC teams that you haven't picked that I would think about are the Chargers and the Ravens. But obviously Lamar is a kind of big question mark.
Yeah. I'll throw you a bone. I'll say Cowboys is my last team there. I mean, I still don't understand like what the flaw in that team was this year.
So no love for the Vikings.
No, sorry.
The flaw in the Cowboys, by the way, is the new flaw in the Chargers, Kellen Moore. So we've Trojan horsed it.
Fair enough.
But wow, so you picked 4 NFC teams and only 3 AFC, despite your intentions.
That does not feel right. I don't.
You went Eagles. Your NFC teams were Eagles, Cowboys, Niners, and Lions. Lions, whatever, kind of a half pick because of the homerism. And then on the AFC side, you went Bills, Bengals, and the Jaguars. You took the Jaguars over the Chargers and the
Yeah.
Ravens.
Absolutely.
Wow.
I don't feel bad about that at all. And you know what? If the Chiefs are in the conversation, I mean, I know who's going to beat the Chiefs, who's going to seed them, but I got 4-4 now. Like,
I don't know who the worst to first candidate is for next year.
Ooh, that's a good question.
Okay, let's end on this.
Yeah.
Usually there's a team that goes from worst to first to win the division. Who was the team this year? The Jaguars, I guess, were the team.
Yep.
Obviously. So our 8 candidates, I think we've had, and there's been like a worst to first team for every year for like 11 years or something like this at this point. On the AFC side, you had the New York Jets, the Cleveland Browns, the Houston Texans, and the Denver Broncos. And then on the NFC side, you had the Washington Commanders, the Chicago Bears, who had the number 1 overall pick, the Atlanta Falcons, and the Arizona Cardinals. Who was the most likely team to go from worst to first in 2023? I know the answer, like I did with Nick Bolton, but we'll see if you get it right.
Man, I can't say I know a ton about the Atlanta Falcons, but just looking at that division, it kind of feels like it might be the Atlanta Falcons.
That's wrong. But I mean, your logic is fair because the Bucs are going to really regress.
Yeah.
Who knows about the Saints? And, I don't know. I mean, I don't really buy into Frank Reich, but we'll see. That's a fair answer. Plus that would kind of like extend Arthur Smith for a little while. You can kind of like see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
My answer for a similar reason, although the Jaguars exist, was going to be the Texans. Like you could see the D'Amico Ryans effect taking hold. I mean, they get to beat up on the Colts and Titans. I mean, do we really believe in the Jaguars? Like in a formidable way? Like you only put them on your list because you put the Lions on there. You know what I'm saying? Like that was the big reason why. So I mean, I think that there's more talent to work with there if they get the right quarterback. I could see it.
Okay.
All right, cool. Rachel, will you please join us? And number 1, tell us what things have been like at Bleeding Green Nation in the last, 12 to 15 hours. And also your thoughts on the Super Bowl and something interesting about the world. And then, of course, we want to MFW MVP.
Yes. I think things are kind of, what's the word? Last night, it was definitely sad. I know personally, like Jeremy talked about, one of my biggest takeaways from him was the fact that the story of the game was like the 0 sacks allowed. Like, I just knew Hassan Reddick was going to have a dominant performance. And so the fact that nobody hit home, like, I was just like, this is like the Monstars from Space Jam. They lost their power. So that sucked to see. And so it was just kind of like a weird place because, like you guys already talked about, Jalen Hurts did a phenomenal job. You can't knock that. But at the end of the day, the defense did not step up and do what they were supposed to do. So it's kind of just like you're happy for Jalen Hurts and you're proud for the future. But at the same time, it's just like they were capable of winning this game and they kind of like beat themselves. Yeah. So that sucked. I love the Rihanna Run This Town song. I think something about the world, her announcing her pregnancy, her second pregnancy during the Super Bowl halftime performance, that was like a really big deal. And the fact that she put on a show and you're pregnant, like what? Like, kudos.
Imagine being that kid. It's like, well, how'd your mom tell everybody that like you were going to be born? Well, she performed halftime of the Super Bowl.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
That was really cool. But I love the worst to first candidates that you presented towards the end, RJ. I think that's a good conversation starter. I also loved how you talked about Nick Sirianni and his game management and like deciding not to go for that like timeout. And Jeremy, also like that you talked about like giving credit to Mahomes, especially with like the contract and everything. And so today I'm going to give it to Jeremy. I think you did a really good job.
Whoa. I think, Jeremy, this is your first MFW MVP?
Is this the start of a dynasty?
Oh!
Wow. That makes me the Eagles of this episode. I don't know how comfortable I am with that. Wow, Jeremy, you are today's MFW MVP. How are you feeling? Who would you like to thank? The floor is yours.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna thank the mothership because yesterday concluded my first year as a full-time employee at SB Nation. So it's an incredible run. It was it was a big year for Pride of Detroit, big year for the Detroit Lions, and it was awesome to be part of this team, part of this podcast, get to meet and interact with a bunch of cool people now that we share a Slack room. So I just want to thank SB Nation and Vox Media for seeing the potential in Pride of Detroit and me.
That was really sweet. Like, this is usually mostly like a narcissistic part of the show, and you
Right?
kind of ruined that with your like love and
Oh.
adoration for everybody.
Oh.
Wow. Jeremy, you rock. Pride of Detroit rocks. We're really happy that the Lions had the success that they did and that you guys had the success that you did. Jeremy is also somebody who I've annoyed with a lot of questions on how to do a lot of different things, and he has put up with that and given me much of his time, as has his staff over at POD. Rachel, I love you too. You're great. I mean, like, you make this show work. You make this show sing. And so I don't know what the future of the SB Nation NFL show is actually. Like, we're kind of in a weird place, so we're going to see what happens. So, Rachel, I think the final words should belong to you. You should tie a bow on this, whatever it's going to wind up being, and send us into the future. Like, that's where we're at. We're Marty and the Doc, and Einstein, I guess, and we're in the DeLorean, and we're going to hit 88 miles an hour. So send us home.
I'm just going to send us home by saying that you got to give credit to Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he is definitely a Hall of Fame quarterback for sure. And he was able to be, I'm going to steal a line from what John Stonis said yesterday. He was able to be a superior team. Like, I think the Eagles were a better team, but Patrick Mahomes is a Hall of Fame quarterback, and he definitely was able to beat them on his own. So got to give it to him.
Wow. Okay, Rachel, I want you to think carefully about this,
Yes.
and then I want you to end everything. Like I said, we don't know what the future has in store, so I want you to say the last word. Like, I want you to pick what the last word is going to be, and it might be the last word that we ever do. Who knows? So, like, I want you to think about that word, and I want you to say the word, and then I want you to end this, please.
Love.